tweeted, I think this was yesterday, pumped for homeschooling day one. Is this you being sincere or optimistic?
Yeah. Tom, a little bit of irony there. No, first day of homeschooling this morning in the Minns household. My oldest in Year 7 and my middle boy in Year 5. And as I was leaving, they were on a big Zoom hookup with their teachers. Look, very, very difficult for teachers, very difficult for parents. I know in my household too. We've all got to try and make do, but it's a really tough circumstance for thousands and thousands of families in Sydney at the moment and the regions as we battle with homeschooling.
And a lot of people will be asking why. I know we've had you on the program before. You've spoken about following the health advice, but are you wanting, to hear questions around why settings, were toughened during the go, if you like? Initial settings became tougher. There's now more restrictions for parts of Sydney. Do you think it's at least worth asking, was the right approach taken? Was the health advice good? Was the option, health advice is never one thing to do. Was the right option taken? Because you can always learn for next time.
Yeah, look, there's two things here. Obviously, there'll be an opportunity for questions in relation to what happened, the circumstances, the chronology that led to the lockdown of Sydney, what's happened in southwestern Sydney. But I do have to say the government has been rather responsive with the opposition's engagement with them, particularly in relation to the police approach to southwestern Sydney. They seemed to listen to what the opposition were saying and community leaders. And we tried to play a constructive role in that too, Tom, like telling the community to stay at home, listen to the health orders as the best way of getting through this health crisis and shortening the period of time when normal life has been interrupted by the COVID pandemic.
It seems Delta might have caught a few people on the hop. Do you think at the same time the New South Wales Premier deserves credit? There were a lot of times when she could have shut down previously. She didn't, and it kept so many businesses open. And time and again, previously, it proved to be the right option. Is that important for people to keep in their minds as well?
Well, look, obviously these are judgment calls. They're fine judgment calls often between the Chief Health Advice and other various stakeholders. We've said from the very beginning we'll offer bipartisan support to the New South Wales government, provided they're following the health advice. And we're confident to date, 18 months into this pandemic, they've done that. But we have set some lines in the sand, particularly in relation to financial help. I mean, it's been 6 or 7 days since the lockdown's been extended in Sydney, and a financial package or a comprehensive package still hasn't been released by the Commonwealth and state government. We're very concerned about that, and we're concerned that there won't be a return to growth and a robust economy once the lockdown's lifted.
We'll know about that soon enough. Let me ask you about that in a moment. But the final question in terms of the lockdown, essential workers are not being defined. The Health Minister seemed to get a little bit defensive about that today. In Victoria, they were quite tightly defined. We've had apparently a painter that was able to travel from Sydney to Goulburn test positive. Do you think it's easy enough or it's a good idea to define what essential work is at this point of what might be a longer lockdown?
Well, look, we're open to that. Obviously, if the government determines that that would in effect clamp down even harder on the lockdown in Sydney. I think by measuring the number of people who are moving in Sydney, the numbers are way down compared even to last week. So most of Sydney is getting the message, and the regions as well. Southwestern Sydney in particular, in many suburban top streets, is a bit of a ghost town. So I think the message is slowly getting out there to the community, and they are following the health advice. And if that is happening without prescriptive orders from the New South Wales government, well, that means that the system's working, and we would continue to offer bipartisan support in relation to that.
On financial support, you've been calling for JobKeeper to be reinstated. It's not going to be, but it seems quite close from the details we do know that are set to be announced around payments to businesses, support even for casual workers that have lost hours, making sure that businesses are keeping employees attached. From what we've heard so far, is this the sort of thing you've been after?
Yeah, look, it does look like it's heading in the right direction, but it's obviously a day late. We're hoping it's not $1 short. The government really needs to have something. They can call it whatever they want. They don't have to call it JobKeeper if, for political reasons, they don't want to. But we do need financial support for businesses to keep their employees on the books. That's the key element, I think, to having a robust economy once the lockdown's lifted. Now, the Australian economy was projected to grow at 4.75% in 2021 before New South Wales went into lockdown. The key reason for that is that employees were already in place. The labour was already there to take advantage of the lockdown being lifted. I'm concerned in Sydney, if those measures are not brought in, there'll be a divorce in relation to that. You'll see unemployment rise, and we won't be ready to take advantage of the lockdown lifting and a strong economy off the back end of this, which has got to be everybody's focus.
What about regional support? Because it seems it will happen for the hotspot. With New South Wales shut off to the rest of the country, there are going to be places in the region, particularly tourism businesses, that have no customers from the rest of Australia or the rest of the world, no customers from Sydney as well. Have they been possibly forgotten here?
Well, the tourism package was part of the original financial package that was released by the New South Wales government in 2020. We're hopeful that that is part of the government's approach later today. Again, it's a little bit opaque and we're not quite sure what's going to be released. I don't think now's the time to pull back on financial support for business because the implications both for adherence to the health advice but also the health of the economy will be magnified if you don't step in right now. We're asking businesses right across Sydney to close down and shut their doors in order to protect lives. We need to protect their livelihoods over this period. It's a reciprocity that's so essential to make sure Sydney gets through this.
Casting forward, what's your view? Once everyone has been offered a vaccine, should states commit to no more lockdowns?
Well, I think Dan Andrews said it best. I mean, once everybody has had access to a vaccination and it's been offered to them and they've accepted it and we've got to that number, states can't keep closing down their economy for people who refuse to be vaccinated. Now, part of that is going to be the government's responsibility. We need to make sure that there is an information campaign out there driving access to vaccinations and their importance to your personal health and to the economy. I don't think there's any reason to suggest that we won't get there. General vaccination in Australia is actually relatively high, over 90%, in some places 95%. I'm not suggesting we'll get there in relation to COVID vaccines, but it is a strong indication that we've got a vaccine culture in Australia and that needs to be built on to get through the latest pandemic.
Yeah, well, let's hope that works. He seemed to offer a caveat to that, though, today, and saying even at 75%, maybe that's too many people not vaccinated and hospital rates too high. So he seemed to sort of walk away from that today. Are you saying we should stay that course?
No, I'm suggesting that the approach of the state government and the Commonwealth government needs to be about information campaigns. Up to now, it hasn't been a question of vaccine hesitancy because it hasn't been available. Eventually, we'll get to a point where it will be available for everybody. Then an information campaign needs to be rolled out, urging the importance, particularly of frontline workers, to get a vaccine, to get us back to normal. If that fails, then we need to assess it. But until then, the onus is on the state and federal government to drive those rates up.